All right, Ding. What is going on, my man? I hope you're doing incredibly well. We are got a special edition, special time. We appreciate all the live listeners that are able to accommodate. If not, you're watching the playback. You want to listen to us on a regular time on Wednesday. You can do so as well on the playback on either Facebook or YouTube. We appreciate everybody. 2025. What a year it has been in the world of slap fighting. There's been a lot of advancements. We've seen Power Slap move forward. We see the Power Slap Awards taking place here. We're getting some nominees, and then we're also seeing a bunch of other organizations pop up, or other organizations take advancements, give other people opportunities. We're seeing guys formerly of Power Slap compete elsewhere in the world. There's a lot going on, a lot to talk about right now. I think it's incredibly important at this time. Take a little bit of time to reflect on the year that was as we look forward to going to 2025 or 2026, which we're going to be doing here on today's show. We're going to talk about the 5 matches that we believe need to take place in 2026. The roster has never been deeper than it has been now in Power Slap. The overall state of Power Slap, the competitiveness and the level 1 through 10 in Power Slap across multiple divisions is incredibly up in the air. And I think it's a great time to really dive into it, to look at everything as a whole and kind of give some predictions and thoughts of where we think it's going to happen. Dana White said earlier, 12 events in 2026 for Power Slap. Do we still believe at this particular point in moment that that is going to be possible in 2026? I think that's really the biggest question going at play. We do have some clarity. Obviously, we broke some news earlier as to when the next event for Power Slap is going to be taking place in Las Vegas. So we're going to get into that. And who do you guys think should headline it? We know Power Slap Official put it out there for you guys, the fans, to comment on who you want to see. We'll give you guys our advice. And if you're in the chat, drop who you believe should be there as well. Ding, let's talk about it. It's been quite a year overall. I mean, where is your head at kind of coming into the new year?
Yeah, like you said, I think the pace has been set at a pretty high mark when you talk about 12 events in 2026. We're starting off the year about 65 or so days in. We're gonna get our first event. Doesn't exactly, give me a ton of confidence that we'll be able to get to 12. I mean, 11 events in, between March and December is going to be tough. Obviously, the, second half of December, let's say, is safe to say is pretty much off limits. 3 events we've heard from Sin was pretty arduous on their team. So I'm with you. I don't know that we'll be able to get 12 events, but what I will say is I think now that this is kind of the third full year that we're doing this, right? So obviously 2023, majority of the year, Road to the Title leaked into it a little bit. The first event was in March. Fast forward, that entire year, 2024, the entire year we went, on Power Slap was kind of standing. 2025 now, again, the same is true. They put on, if I'm not mistaken, 7 events, right? 11 to 17. And so I think stories are at an all-time high. There's a lot of things for things that kind of just make sense, things that can come together. I don't know that we have to necessarily poke and prod and create and make things up or anything like that. There's stuff that just makes sense, right? There's equity in this bill. Abby Montez, obviously her rise coming up and becoming kind of a clear contender for Sheena Bethori. I don't know that that'll be for a championship. That's up to the promotion. It seems like from what Frank said to you earlier this year, they may be a little gun shy, or actually in October, might be a little bit shy on that, on introducing female championships until those divisions are kind of fully fledged out. Obviously, Sheena in a division that really doesn't have any talent, so completely understood if that's not the way they go, but it is important to figure out who's the best female in the world at 145 pounds. And I think right now, the very 2 top contenders to talk about are Abby Montez and Sheena Bathory. You also have a guy like the Crazy Hawaiian, started the year at super heavyweight, lost his championship to the Dumpling on January 30th in Saudi Arabia. Fast forward to where we sit today, he's now a light heavyweight, and he's on our card for a match against the champion Wolverine at light heavyweight. Who saw that coming? Who saw that on the bingo card? To the contrary, you have the Hawaiian Hitman, his brother, avenging his loss to the Dumpling, defeating the Dumpling by decision at Power Slap 13, June 27th, becoming the super heavyweight champion of the world. I mean, you can't write this stuff. This is like Hollywood-esque kind of stories that are just built. It's real, it's reality. And so I think we're primed and ready to go into 2026. I will say I'm slightly disappointed, although I do understand the difficulty in booking events. I'm slightly disappointed that we have such a large gap. It seemed like with the October stride, the quick turnaround between 13 and 14 going to New Orleans, then we go to, from Vegas, 2 weeks later you're in Abu Dhabi, and a week later you're in Saudi Arabia. and then dormant until March 6th. It feels like a little bit of a letdown, if I'm being honest, but nonetheless, we will persist. We'll be here. We're very interested. There's a lot of stories and cliffhangers that we were left with in 2025. So let's look forward to a 2026 that kicks off with a bang. So let's see who that first main event's going to be, man. Who do you think?
For sure. Well, I mean, you know what? Only the purists would understand this, but I mean, are we being hung up right now with the lack of a broadcast deal? Is that delaying when we see these events? Obviously, we know the home of Power Slap is on YouTube right now. We don't foresee that that's being the long-term home for it right now. Is there a Netflix deal? Is there Paramount? Is there other streaming platforms that are vying for the distribution rights of it online? And then obviously, as we kind of talked about, and Dana White talked about it on social as well, is the venue deal also holding things up? We know there's one more event at Fontainebleau, but what is going to happen afterwards? And it was kind of like what we talked about, Abby Montez, Sheena Bathory, and what Frank said to us. It's like, it's not about just that one match, but it's like, what is next? What happens next? How do you build that filler? And do we see Power Slap being a little bit gun shy or slow out of the gate here in 2026 until they get their ducks in a row on some of those particular, major economical impact and factors that play into the future of Power Slap? But like you alluded to, and as you talked about, there's been, no time in history in Power Slap that we have as many natural and organic storylines to be able to tell and matches that make sense as we go forward. And I mean, I think it's an incredibly interesting time, as we alluded to. And it's not only at the top. I mean, before, the match at the top, we've seen 2-3 title matches on every single card. I think it's fairly safe to say we're not going to get that going into 2026, especially if they're going to hit that 10 to 12 events as they're talking about. So we have to get used to having one title match on that card. And I mean, the main card, those other 3 matches, I mean, we're getting to a spot now where there is intrigue, there is interest, there's rivalries, there's people that hate each other, there's people that are really building in that kind of, 2 through, 6, 7 range that is completely up in the air into who fights. And there's a lot of deep storylines. Guys like Stunt Marshall, guys like Johnny Magna sitting there who have highlight reel knockouts that are looking for a competitor in the top of the division to really shake things up. And I think we're going to get that relatively soon. I mean, these guys are coming on, obviously, from the recruits of Sin Bodhi. And I think there's more in the trenches. Obviously, we just had the camp early December, and we're seeing a whole flush of new talent come into the system. And if you haven't, head over to our YouTube channel to check out some of those interviews that we had at the camp. We're releasing more and more interviews right now. And there's a ton of great talent, guys with experience and newcomers that have athletic backgrounds, some of the highest athletic backgrounds, American gold medalists, et cetera, coming into Power Slap that have, a high level of achievement and accomplishment outside of the sport coming into Power Slap now, which is going to elevate everybody, I believe, to be better in 2026. I forget even the question you asked me, but, you alluded to it. I said last week, Isaiah Quiones versus Wolverine, I thought would be an incredible matchup. One, to me, that made sense on paper. I'm still going to stay there. I know we kind of pivoted a little bit with the crazy Hawaiian coming into that light heavyweight division, bypassing Damien DeBell, which isn't necessarily a bad thing to do. But if we can get that collision course of the crazy Hawaiian, the former super heavyweight champ, taking on Wolverine, 2-division champ at heavyweight as well as light heavyweight, I mean, what a matchup that would be, at least within the continental United States as well as Hawaii, and really, which is the purest in life. But I think this if it's going to happen, I think it needs to happen in the early part of the year, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, you know what? I can't say that I disagree. I think striking while the iron's hot has been something that the promotion has struggled with in some cases. In my opinion, and I'll say this now, this is probably one of those moments that you'll see on social, but I think we're too late for Westman and Ponopal. I have no interest in that match. I'm not convinced that they need to compete against each other to figure out who's the best in the world. I think the bad blood is old. It's dormant. I don't think that there's any need to rehash it. What said was said. There's been such a long time since. There's been matches made for both men since they started their rivalry. They never were matched up against each other. I'm not sure why that was, but I think that is something that I no longer personally have any interest in. I'm interested to see what the fans, what the chat thinks. If you guys are interested in Ponopal Westman is still facing off, I think it's long overdue, and I just am not interested in it anymore. I think they're too close in ranking. West has lost to a lot of the guys in front of him at this point. Ponopal has yet to face a lot of the guys in front of him to this point, with the exception of the number 1 ranked Dorian Perez, of course. And so I think that there's still a lot to understand as far as where these guys really belong in their divisions. Obviously, they're at that top echelon in the top 5, and they're kind of circling each other. because they're right next to one another, right in consecutive rankings. I don't see any need for a match to determine who moves one way or the other. I need true movement. I need Nate Bernard, at number 2 to figure out should he really be there. Obviously, he had his match against Aaron Turner, but Aaron Turner was ranked quite high at the time. Paulo Paul's not as far. Wes Mena's not as far. So, that's probably my hot take of the evening. I don't think Paulo Paul Wes Mena has any interest to me, and I truly believe should that match have taken place, that would have been the rivalry of the year. No disrespect to Brendan and Isaiah, but their relationship has been very up and down. They've been friends and friendly and cordial. They've hated each other, even to some extent now. It seems like they're still respectful in some way. Paulo Paul and Wes Mena hate one another as we sit here today. And so I think at the time, at the peak of that, around July-ish in the summer would have been the perfect time to get that match taken care of. And now that we have not, I don't believe that there's any need for it anymore. What are your thoughts on that hot take? Because I think that's the first time I've ever said that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I mean, I think one of the things that we admire about dirty boxing is they have the ability, the flexibility to be able to strike when the iron is hot. They're incredibly savvy. When people get released from the UFC, they're there right on the get go. Hey, let's make this match make sense. I mean, even we see Abe, talking about this whole Andrei Arlovsky versus the bodyguard of, the streamer.
Jack Doherty, yeah.
Jack Doherty. We see Abe in there. Hey, I'm the agent that represents Arlovsky. Let's make this happen. I think I would love to see that flexibility come into power slapping to be able to strike when the iron is hot. I think that match made a lot of sense coming out of New Orleans. And even around that time, as you said, the animosity was real. But I'm going to pivot a little bit. We got Wes Mena coming off 2 losses now. One to Damien DeBell, the current champ, where the strap was on the line. And then obviously against Darius the Destroyer as well afterwards. I would like to kind of put a bit of a spin on it. I actually think somebody who is a younger version of Wes Mena is one Jordan Oasis. I think Jordan Oasis versus Wes Mena would be a phenomenal match to be able to see. Can Wes Mena get it right? And is Jordan Oasis real? Wes Mena is holding a record of 4-2. He is no slouch. Jordan Oasis coming with all that energy, the emotion, and everything that he has done, I think is primed for a collision course with Wes Mena. I think in some ways they're similar strikers. I think they fight with their heart on their sleeve. And this would be an epic matchup to put on to start, a main card in one of these fights coming up. And I'd love to see that.
I'm curious, as you say that, what if, and I mean, not that they're going to do this, I think it's highly unlikely, but what if, Frank, you know what, actually, I take that back. And excuse me for flip-flopping here, chat. I'm thinking through this as I speak it. As you know, your boy's not the best at prepping, so bear with me if you will. But Frank said to us in October, right before Power Style 15, obviously, Corey, you sat down with him, and he said to us, there could be a time, there could be a day where we see the early prelims aired live as part of the broadcast where people can come and enjoy it, and that would extend an event to 12, 15, 16, matches for people to be able to enjoy versus 8. Is, number one, the first part of my question is 2026 that year? And the second part of my question is it the time, March 6th, 2026, for you to trial that, to figure out if that works, if there's a desire with the stacked talent that you have in several of these divisions? Obviously, like I said, you have the heavyweight division has been on fire. There's plenty of matches you can make. You can make an entire card in just heavyweight, and every fight will be interesting. Super heavyweight has guys like Cole Smith, who has a very close match that he was on the wrong side of, but people thought it went both ways. The person who beat him, Leon Johnson, where's he at, right? He had a good performance as well. Stephen Rousey, right, taking shots from Makini Manu. Obviously, that third time, isn't able to take that shot completely, but gets back up to his feet and ends the night standing. I would love to see him back. What happened? You got guys like, we talked about Vince Tracy. Where's he going to be? 55, 70? We need 70 to fill out more. Is KO Chris going to debut at 85? We talked about Sheena. We haven't seen Sheena in the United States in this entire year. Is she going to come back? Can we get her back over here? She's a superstar here. Can we see her step on stage in Las Vegas in 2026? Robert Trujillo, obviously. Who's the next challenger that's going to rise up in his division? Middleweight. Isaiah Quinones wins the trilogy, excuse me. Brandon Rhodes is right there. He's the guy that's been talked about. The Chief will be off of suspension at the end of January. He's the guy that's right there. Darren Godfrey will be off suspension over the summer. He's the guy that we talked about for the number one contender spot. Kind of the clearest one. What does Brandon Bordeaux do next? Does he step away? Does he coach? Does he do both? Does he do one? He said it, and I licked my lips when he said it. Pause. Him as the coach, his brother as the competitor. I love it. I love that. I love that. That's a story. That's something that I can get behind. And although the Crazy Hawaiian wasn't technically the coach, It was a similar thing when his brother stepped up against the Dumpling. I've said on record, and I'm not gonna recant my statement because I know more information, but I will say that it doesn't seem like what I said about the Dumpling is true. The Dumpling commented on one of our posts and he said, "I'm ready." That tells me the Dumpling has an interest to return and continue his climb to the top of the super heavyweight division once again, which proves me wrong. Which is not the first time. So for those of you who want to gloat, specifically Yodu, because you seem to hate me, brother, congratulations. The Dumpling proved me wrong once again. So Pono Paul, where's he gonna go? He's this guy who, you know, he stutter stepped with the Dorian Perez match. Then he knocks out and avenges a loss that he had. Everybody he stepped in front of, with the exception of Dorian, he's knocked them out. You have Zakir, who's done the same thing but couldn't do it to Dorian. Where's Dorian at? Dorian's on our list for Damien DeBell too. I mean, I'm just rattling this off the top of my head. All the stories that there are going into 2026, and I'm sure I forgot a few, right? Ellie with the big upset against Mikey Michelle Brown. Then she competes against Hollywood Haley J, gets one of, if not the first, one of the first TKOs in flyweight history. Now looks like maybe she's next for Paige Van Zandt. Will Paige Van Zandt return in 2026? There's so many questions and things that we can do and directions that we can head in. I'd love to see it all. So is 2026, I'll get back to my original question, is 2026 the time for us to get to early prelim, you know, aired event?
So, I mean, the UFC obviously does it. You know, the amount of people that show up at the UFC event, you know, from the start of the card is definitely minimal in comparison. But obviously, you and I have been there for the Power Slap from the beginning, being able to watch all the early prelims that are taped, and they run it just as professional as they do the live event. I don't know the downside in doing it, and I see the potential for the upside that can become. Imagine if you had the attendants who wanted to be there, the people to see, you know, Johnny Magna take care of Ricky South. You know, also, you know, Zoe Dubois and potentially where she could be at if you had the vested fan interest that was able to see that fight live. You know, you also look at winners like a Zach Zane, a guy who's kind of been around. But if you can put these people in front of them in real time and get them vested in that story, it propels them up the ranks. So I don't really see the downside in order to do it. Maybe there's staffing issues, etc. Doesn't make sense. Maybe you have belligerent fans that start drinking earlier in the day, but I guess they could do it at the casino anyways. So I don't really see why not. I think it makes absolute perfect sense to do this. I think you would groom new superstars. You would get people vested in the careers of these athletes earlier, to be quite honest with you. And I think overall, more fan access, more visibility is going to help the support of the growth of it, especially as you go into having more events with less title fights. You need to have more interesting fights on that main card. And the more that you can get people vested in these early fights as they rise up through the rank, you're going to have more vested, more loyal followers that not only support the fighters, but then support the events themselves. And I think overall help the sport grow. So I have a big emphatic yes, stamp of approval from Slap News that I would love to see this starting in March.
Yeah, you know, I think as you say that, as you sort of talk through it, I think one of the big concerns will be, can you captivate an audience for that long of a period of time? Meaning, you know, events now are probably between two and 2.5 hours. Excuse me. Obviously, there's pre that goes into it. There's post that goes into it that fans don't see and are not a part of. But it's a staffing need. It's a manpower problem. So my only question is, I don't know which side of the fence I fall on, to be honest, on this subject. But my only question would be, can you keep people engaged in 15 matches of slap, double the amount of matches that they're used to and accustomed to seeing now? Because like I said, and I can't say that I've seen it to this degree, but I remember distinctly, I'll never forget, Power Slap 10. If I'm not mistaken, it was Power Slap 10, December of last year. Damien DeBell beat Dorian Perez. As soon as the match was over, no decision. The judges were deliberating. The referees were trying to grab the scorecards. Justin was getting on stage, etc. And the place emptied. And so that, to me, was like, all right, like once the action ended, people were not interested in the outcome. They're not there yet at that time. That was a year ago. Is it now that they'll stick around for double the amount of time, or even 50% more of the time that they have now if you add, 4 matches? I think that's probably the concern, is you don't want to make an ass out of yourself when you invite people to an event that you're asking them to pay for. In a lot of cases, purists of it will love it, but people who are just in town and, maybe they're in town for UFC or BJJ or something that's happening in that week, is it something that they're going to want to be at for 3.5, 4 hours potentially? I think that's probably the concern. That's probably why they're being a little bit hesitant on that, because you don't want, the last thing you want is to tap a crowd out. I mean, you do live events, right? There's a sweet spot you got to find depending on what kind of show you're putting on, and maybe they think that they haven't done enough of a job to sell it to that audience, whether it's in Las Vegas or on the road, to get them to stick around for, 4 hours or so to enjoy festivities like that. Whereas the UFC, a lot of people don't show up for the early prelims. So if you compare the two, right, in theory, if the early prelims are kind of sleepers and there's not a ton of fan participation for pay-per-views, and then you go to Power Slap and you say, I'm going to do early prelims, in theory, the same would be true. You'd have low attendance at the beginning of the night, which I don't know if that's a bad thing per se. I'm not sure. I can't tell you the answer to that question. I'm just thinking out loud as to what the potential barrier, could be regarding making a move like that. But I would be interested to see, like you said, we're there anyway, so we're obviously biased because we're sitting there putting in the time. I think the only difference is obviously if something's not publicly available to everyone, we're not going to be the guys to deliver that, because that would be rude and disrespectful for the privilege. But of course, we're still there, we're still filming, we're still at, in some cases we're talking to the athletes who have family in the house, that we're chatting with them, getting their reaction, learning a little bit about them. So for us it's actually a pretty unique time where you get this unusual intimacy that you don't get in an event, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you this. I actually, from an event planning standpoint, and if I was employed by Power Slap and I was able to do this, I would be pushing for the audience to be attendance for this early prelim, because I think what you could do is you could make an incredibly amazing interactivity with the athletes and the fans. You run the early fights as they do now. And then between that hour to hour and a half to when the main broadcast comes on, you create an environment outside in the lobby where you have the athletes and the fans be able to mingle, interact, take photos, and engagement. Like, how do you make an event around the event? And for the people that want to be there, build a loyal fan base and the following that you do, you make your athletes more accessible. And I think if you get those early fights on, you allow the fans to see that, and then you create this atmosphere outside of the venue that brings that closer, takes it away, the gap or that fence that sits there between the stage and the audience members. Allow them to come and interact with those athletes, mingle, have social. That's how you really build the grassroots of this, especially when you take it on the road. There's so many people that we see. Obviously, we travel, even in New Orleans. Remember when we were at Caesars Casino in New Orleans? We were there with some of the strikers and people coming up and taking selfies, et cetera, in the casino, in the days leading up to the event, not only just at the after party, but creating that connectivity, that availability is really going to allow for you. And when you create that cool, environment, you capture it for social, you drive it, and it will grow over time. It's not instant success, but over the long term, it's the right way to grow the sport. And I think there's no downside in doing it. I mean, we can talk about, obviously the early prelims typically have more fouls. These are strikers for the first time that are getting up there on stage, have never striked a human. So I guess there's that risk and that element of it. But then I would put that back on recruiting and training. Have these athletes ready to go. Professional athletes, professional licenses under the athletic commission. You shouldn't have the fouls, the strikes. Thinking back to, Julia Ho versus Desiree, and the weirdness that went on there with, swinging on the wrong count, et cetera. Like, can you live with those mistakes being made with a live audience? I think you should, if you are going to hold yourself to the highest standard as being a professional athlete, whether you release that fight live in real time or you release it later on YouTube, you should still be held to the same standard.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, man. And I don't know how many people know this, but for those of you who have never been to the UFC Expo, or what they call shorthand UFC X, in Las Vegas during International Fight Week, I got to be honest, this year I don't know what the plan will be. Obviously, your International Fight Week is slated right now to be June 14th at the White House. So I'm not sure how they'll adapt that, if they'll continue to do UFC X in the convention center from Las Vegas. And, because you can't really go to the UFC White House anyway. It's a kind of an invite-only thing, it sounds like. And for those who are going to attend it that are buying tickets, you're going to be like at the Lincoln Monument. Like, I mean, it's not going to be what you would want to pay for. At the same time, obviously the nature of the event, the scale of it, the big grand, it being at the White House, the history behind it, many people will want to be there, and I get that. But for those who can't make it, I'd imagine they do UFC X. Where I'm going with this is, at UFC X, they do a lot of things, a lot of activations. They have WWE stuff going on there. The UFC store has a pop-up. They have T-shirts, meet and greets, autograph signings. There's food, you name it. There's Media Row, where there's a lot of, live shows going on. Different outlets are interviewing athletes. Athletes are walking around. They do shows on the stage. There's tons of stuff going on. One of the things that they have done, if I'm not mistaken, they've done it every year since Power Slap has existed. They've done a Power Slap element to the UFC X, and that's evolved over time. Corey, you could talk about the first year. I wasn't at that one. That was Power Slap number 3. I don't know what the scale of it was, but I know Power Slap number 8. I was there. That was June 2024. And it was relatively small. It was right at the entrance on the right side. There was a TV, a banner. I think they had a belt or two there for people to take photo ops with, and they may have had, if I'm not mistaken, Robert Trujillo and maybe Damien DeBell that were doing like photo ops and meet and greets and stuff. And performance was performance, and it went okay. I would say it was average by any standard. Fast forward, I think during that same period of time, they also did a pop up at Palace Station, if I'm not mistaken, and they had a meet and greet there. Same guys. Again, attendance was what it was. It wasn't a complete letdown, but it wasn't like blowing through the doors to get to the athletes. I think this past year they did it, and from what I was told, it was a massive success. Tons of people taking photos and coming to meet the athletes, getting 8x10 signed and stuff like that. So I think they need more of that. Put them in front of fans. A lot of UFC fans are not into Power Slap. I got that. A lot of UFC fans are not into the WWE, and the WWE is there, right? Why? Because the WWE is under that umbrella. And so I think it's important. Obviously, I'm not comparing Power Slap and the WWE. For those who are ready to roast me, put your guns away. Hold on a second. What I'm saying to you is, just because the crossover fan isn't largely perfect, doesn't mean that you won't get some of them. And so a lot of it is a lack of understanding. Maybe they meet a person and they're like, man, this guy's way cooler than I thought. He's way nicer than I thought. Maybe I had a shirt that he liked, or I have a tattoo that we shared in common, or something that grasped my attention, and now I'm invested in that person, that human being, irrespective of what they do, and now I'm going to support the sport just because of that. And we've seen that happen before, and so I think it's important for them to take those opportunities to get in front of fans. Would it hurt you to do a small Power Slap activation? Maybe you don't have to bring an athlete out to in tandem with it if it's a money thing, but if you're on the road for a UFC pay-per-view, why not do a small little pop-up during your UFC fan experience, that fans are allowed to go to? Obviously, you don't have to, and in fact, most of them, the majority of them, probably won't. But I think, to your point, it's an opportunity for you to put it in front of more fans and get more engaged fans. Obviously, we here pay attention to that kind of thing, right? How invested somebody is. Is it a casual person? Is it somebody that's going to chat you up every once in a while, maybe toss a like on your post here and there? Is it somebody who's going to engage on all your posts? Is it somebody who's going to get into the stories and the lore? I think that's what they kind of got to help to drive a little bit. And I don't know exactly what the hesitancy there is, because the man himself, the head honcho at the UFC, is the head honcho here, so to speak. Obviously, Frank sits in the role of the CEO and the president. He's the face of this thing. But Dana White is the driver here. This is his business, so to speak. And so I think, who's going to tell him no? I'm not really sure what I haven't done that, but it's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, they have in a sense did it in Abu Dhabi as well, because if you recall, in the middle of the mall that is on Yaz Island, they have an open workout with the UFC, and then they actually did incorporate a Power Slap station as well. They had some of the strikers go out and do some meet and greet when they're there, so they've kind of toyed with the idea of doing it, in a small scale or a small perspective. But I think the more that they can incorporate it, the better it's going to become to be able to build those connections and the grassroots. I mean, you and I sit here, and when we're talking very small scale, guerrilla, grassroots, obviously they have bigger visions of, millions of views, etc., growing internationally overseas. And so maybe just a matter of the alignment, the execution, and the implementation of what the overall, mission and directive of these companies are. And so, that's maybe just where the divide is. But I do see the comment from FAP in the chat, and I did actually ask Dana White this question. Could we have a Power Slap event at the White House? And he told me absolutely not. He wanted nothing to do with that answer. He wasn't going to have it. I don't think 6 months later his mind is going to change on it. And unfortunately, I don't think this time around we are going to get Power Slap at the White House, for as cool as that would be. Whether it's you or somebody else in that main event, I think we should start out by getting FAP into Power Slap first with a match to see his true skill set before we anoint him as a headliner on a Power Slap card.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. So the first thing I'll say is, it's tough for anybody in any situation. And I don't want to get like philosophical, so I'll make this brief. But it's tough for anybody in any situation to look at a situation other than their own. Obviously, we are all Power Slap fanatics, fans, whatever you want to call that, to describe how dedicated and interested we are in it. the UFC is actually not as well received at the White House as I initially thought it might be. I thought it was very cool. A lot of people, pundits, people who aren't UFC fans, which the truth is, yeah, and hopefully I'm not hurting feelings or breaking news by saying this, majority of the United States is not a UFC fan, right? In comparison to the whole, majority of people do not tune into the UFC. That's a fact. Take the whole number, parse it out. The percentage is not the same, and it doesn't favor the UFC. So the largest majority of people in the United States, I'd say it's safe to say, have a problem with the UFC going at the White House. They think it's a joke, it's making a mockery of history, yada yada yada. I was actually surprised to find that out. And so when you look at Power Slap, which is still very, very, muddy and questionable, and it's not socially acceptable to the average person, there's just no way. So it makes perfect sense why he said no. Obviously, we're knuckleheads and we're crazy enough to ask him a question like that. It made for good TV, but unfortunately, it does not look like that's the case. To that point, though, about FAP, you reminded me, Corey, we stated to you last week that, what did I say, something bad? Or are you reading something?
No, I'm just saying the White House for Power Slap is actually Power Slap in Sturgis. People are sleeping on what that actually means.
We'll get to that. Keep that on the tip of your tongue. You're over there, make sure you zip your pants up. If you're wet, wipe it up, whatever. But
Hands up, hands up.
no hands, no hands. What regarding the FAP thing? So I actually did clarify with Damien DeBell. We spoke to him, and he did say that it was the alcohol in the house that didn't allow him to be on the season. It was not related to his age and competing under 21. So that puts Audrey Munoz on the table as a potential person that's going to debut in 2026. So for those of you who are interested, you may see the next female flyweight star coming out of this last combine in 2026 at the age of 18 years old. But nevertheless, Corey, I didn't know what Sturgis was. Excuse me, I'm a New Yorker. That's not exactly my crowd per se. Although I did watch Sons of Anarchy and Mayans. I'm a huge fan of the motorcycle thing. The Hells Angels is a New York thing, so I respect it. But I'm not too familiar. So, Corey, for those people who are ignorant like myself, who come from the Northeast or a place where that stuff isn't really, prominent, tell us what Sturgis is and how you think that all correlates.
I mean, honestly, dude, Sturgis is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, biker festival in the world. Every single year, I believe it's in South Dakota. You get, motorcyclists and enthusiasts from all around the world. You get some of the biggest brands, Harley Davidson. You get all the podcasts, the influencers doing live shows from the event. We know they've had bare knuckle events in Sturgis, and now we're simply going to get Power Slap in Sturgis. This is going to be the most insane crowd for a Power Slap event yet. Obviously, we don't know if it's going to be indoors or if it's going to be outdoors. But wherever the event is going to be, it is going to be absolutely phenomenal. And I think this is going to raise the status of Power Slap athletes. And if you are on the current roster, you should be vying to put yourself in a position to be on that card particularly. I believe it is in early August. I'd be positioning my career to be on that card because you're going to have, hundreds of thousands of hardcore enthusiasts that are going to love this particular sport. And when they get to see it in person or know that's going on around it, I think they're going to become true, hardcore, passionate fans of Power Slap and the individuals within it. And so if you have an opportunity, I think career-wise for anybody, that is going to be the card that you want to be. And it's going to be the highlight of Power Slap schedule this year, equivalent to what the Power Slap would be, the UFC would be at the White House. So I think everybody should be doing. We don't know obviously where it's going next. We've heard rumors of going to, Oklahoma and competing at the university there, going to Texas, California. But I don't think anything can compare to going to Sturgis. And I think that is going to be the marquee event of the year for Power Slap. And I'm saying that before the start of the year. You can clip it later if you want. I could be completely wrong, but I'm going to put my balls on the line and say Sturgis is the event of the year that you want to be at.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Corey's wet balls on the line for the Sturgis event in August of 2026. I am curious, though. You bring up a great point, just kind of staying in that period of time. When you look at UFC at the White House, Power Slap has always been I won't say a staple. I think the UFC fans would eat me alive, but Power Slap has always been a mainstay in the International Fight Week sphere since it's come about. Obviously, they've done it 3 years in a row. With International Fight Week seemingly leaving Las Vegas, what will happen to Power Slap during that time? Will they stay true to the cadence, to the tradition, and go ahead and go in Vegas the same week? Assuming they have other activations and events in Las Vegas, the fight capital of the world, during that week, which would make sense. Are they going to take it on the road somewhere close to Washington, D.C., like a Virginia or a Maryland, or maybe a North or South Carolina? could they swing that? And that would be something that's interesting to see. And then above and beyond all of that, I mean, Sturgis, I gotta say it. If nobody's gonna say it, KO Chris, if I'm not mistaken, is from South Dakota. And so, could we see KO Chris representing home crowd at 185, whether it's the debut or something else? For where KO Chris's career is, I'm sure he'd love to compete earlier, but I would say save him for the Sturgis card, and that'll be the make or break. Is he gonna be able to do it at 185? Anything different that he did at 70? And unfortunately, I'm just being honest. I don't. This is not my preference or my perception or what. This is just my belief based on what has happened recently. We've seen guys who were scheduled to fight that got called off to fight because their opponent got matched up with somebody else last minute, and then they get cut. They don't even get a chance to compete again. So I will just say with the losses, the antics, obviously the way the last one went was pretty disappointing, especially for a guy like KO Chris. This is probably his last shot. So I don't hate it. KO Chris versus Stunt Marshall, although I don't know that that's fair to Stunt. I think Stunt has earned probably to continue to move up in the middleweight division. I don't know that a win over KO Chris at 185, where KO Chris hasn't competed, will give Stunt that step he needs to get closer to a championship opportunity. Although I do think it is a fun fight. I think it favors KO Chris a lot more than it favors Stunt in the sense of what it'll do for them. So, but Henry, thank you for that. And also, I did see, I think you commented, I asked you last week about the odds for the Hawaiian Hitman and Dumpling, and you said to me that Dumpling was, I think, Hawaiian Hitman was plus 220, so that would qualify as a pretty large upset, so it should be up there for upset of the year. Speaking of which, Corey, we know every winner of the awards except the Striker of the Year, so why don't we talk about those awards in order of the way they came out, our thoughts, some honorable mentions, who we think could have been in the running or considered for those awards, and then we'll go on to our prediction for Striker of the Year. And then maybe I'll tell you guys a little sneak peek or tidbit or funny, thing that you can pay attention to next time. So if you want to know who's going to win an award, we will tell you how to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not particularly sure the order that it went. Obviously, Coach of the Year, Brandon Bordeaux, I believe was the first one that was released. Obviously the amount of coaches that were in that, particular bucket, I think was the least amount of candidates that could possibly be there. We've seen Brandon Bordeaux really relish what it means to be a coach. He's taken it, very personally and professionally. He's, viewed it very similar to coaching, whether it's football, at the high school, collegiate level. He's taken that same mentality. I think he's really taken it further than anybody else has. We've never particularly seen this, I think, in any particular sport. I mean, I know in hockey, they've had kind of coaches also be players, but it's very weird to see a guy, especially at the top when he had the belt, also being a coach in a sport. So very interesting twist and dynamic as to how that unfolds and how Powers Up is using these coaches to position themselves potentially. And I think they kind of lacked it a little bit. I think they could have done a better job with coach selection to really kind of hype that up for future matches in the future. We've seen that they tried to do it, but they never fully committed to doing it. And I think there could have been some reworking around that. But definitely Brandon taking into that perspective and that role, I think, is important and interesting. I sometimes question, though, like, are you an athlete or are you a coach? Should you be picking one or picking the other? I mean, do you want to be known as Coach of the Year, or would you rather be known as, the current middleweight champion? Did focusing on this coaching role take away from your ability to prepare for your last match versus Isaiah Quiones? I mean, just all things that kind of question in my mind. And, maybe there hasn't been enough events yet to really make that, distinction. But if it's going to be more events going forward, is it taking away from your ability to compete as an athlete? I think all these things are important to look into. I don't think anybody can really dispute that Brandon Bordeaux was Coach of the Year, unless you think otherwise. Tell me, Ding.
No, I don't. I don't want to get. I don't want to get murdered out here in these streets. Brandon Bordeaux, I say, was a very fitting Coach of the Year. The reality is of all of this, guys, this is all subjective. It's all our job here is to talk about the reality, which is that Brandon Bordeaux won, and then what we think the commentary as far as who could have been in the running, who could have competed. Like you said, this is a very short list, right? We're talking about guys like Robert Trujillo, guys like Manny Muniz, guys like Anthony Blackburn, for a short period of time, obviously, more so at the camps. Wolverine was at one of the camps, and they didn't bring him back. He's a guy that's kind of a man of few words. Is there something that they saw that they thought maybe he's not connecting with an athlete? I do need to tell you guys, in all honesty, I was very close to saying penetrating the athletes, and quick wit, it stopped me. So you're welcome for that, because that would have been a massive pause moment here on the show. But yeah, was he not able to penetrate that exterior for some of the athletes and get to them and really understand kind of what it was that they needed? One of the things that I like about Brendan Bordeaux, I've seen the Crazy Hawaiian also do this. If I'm not mistaken, Robert Trujillo's done it. I think more coaches have taken it on. Is they look at the footage. Shout out to Ryan Phillips as well. I don't want to forget him. But they grab their athlete, almost poetic justice, and they put them side by side. Sometimes they put their arm around them. They get real close. Isaiah Quinones was also a coach that did this, and they point at the footage on the big screen and they try to talk them through in real time what they did wrong. That's not something that we saw early on. I don't want to misspeak about who started it, who's the first one. So I'll give credit to all the people that I've seen do it. Obviously, I think I give a huge shout out to the athletes who have athletes that don't, or excuse me, the coaches who have athletes that don't speak English. That's a massive barrier to you to be able to get to your athlete. Obviously, trying to translate those things via guys like Sergey, or the translator for Buchin, the translator for Zhao, the translator for. I'm not even sure, actually, now that we sit here, if Mio Ding had a translator up there, but I would assume she did. But being able to do that through another person is very difficult. So I respect and congratulate everybody who was up there and did that. Manny was a breakout coach that I think people did not see coming. Obviously, he spent 2 weeks in the Middle East coaching in Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia to high praise. But there's just something about the way Brendan connects with his athletes, his process, his finesse, across the board. A guy like Robert Trujillo, if you take, you talked about kind of dueling that champion versus coaching role. He's not a guy that talks a lot. He's not, if you go into a restaurant and he's sitting next to you, or you're at a bar, he's not going to turn to you and say like, "Hey, what's up, man? How's everything going?" Like he's a speaks when spoken to kind of guy. But I think this coaching role has actually, forced him in some ways to really embrace, communicating. And I know early on he had some struggles and issues with articulating himself and how he wanted to guide people based on what he wanted to say and what was actually being said. And so I give my kudos to him, because not only has he juggled that role as a coach and as a champion, but also, again, I think he's made a huge stride and transition in the coaching role and being able to sort of get to these athletes a little bit more when it's not necessarily his personality. Isaiah Quinones, I think, is another guy that, of course, is very friendly and embracing, and I think that helps. And so his athletes, obviously, the night that he was the coach at I believe the only time he was the coach off the top of my head was Power Stop 14. Although now that I'm thinking about it, he was the coach, I think, in Saudi Arabia with Brandon at Power Stop 11. Now that I say that, and so I think the most prominent coach has been Brandon, but Isaiah's in there as well. So definitely want to give kudos to all the coaches, because at the end of the day, the athletes can't see what's happening on stage when they're experiencing it. And so it's important for the coach to be able to walk them through those things, help them make those adjustments. Who's to say that the Nate Bernard moment coming back against Aaron Turner would have happened should Nate Bernard have had a coach like Ryan Phillips, which is ironic because those guys have fought before. And so it's just very interesting how all that plays out. And I think Ryan Phillips is another guy that was the right guy, in the moment. They brought him back. He was a coach early on, and I think that he has an energy about him. He's very, very loud and supportive of his athletes. And I think the coaching that he had was on display that evening at Power Slap 15, and I don't think anybody that I've seen had any complaints or concerns about it. So shout out to him as well. But I just made a whole lot out of a very small list. So let's move on.
Let me ask you though, because when I look at it here in particular, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think Power Slap actually released the list of candidates for these individual awards. I think they just put up there that the awards are going to be, as we go into a comeback of the year, and then we've seen the eventual winner. So that's why I'm just doing a little, you may see me looking off screen, but trying to look at for comeback of the year. You and I were actually wrong last week. So I got to bring acknowledgement to that. We thought it was, in a particular match, we had Aaron Turner versus Nate Bernard. Obviously, we were completely off. We thought Nate Bernard was the comeback of the year. We misspoke as to what we thought the criteria was. So before we get into talking about the actual winner for comeback of the year, who else do we have in this particular realm? And so I'm going to pull a couple names that I think are potential candidates. I think one, we should look at Logan Greenhall as being a potential comeback athlete of the year. 2 wins in 2025, putting himself in the top of the division and potentially in line for a title shot versus Wolverine. I also think we've got Brandon Rhodes. I think in 2025 is a guy that's come back as well. From a loss early on in the year to 2 consecutive victories, one over Emmanuel Muniz, the other over Trenton Bordeaux, also putting himself in the conversation at the top of the division. Is there anybody in the top of your mind? I mean, even Cole Young, I think you could put in 2025 potentially as a comeback athlete of the year, a guy that, wasn't necessarily, in the running in the top of the division, was able to come back, obviously become victorious. Who else would you put in that besides those three names that you think that qualify?
The Hawaiian Hitman. That's an easy one. The Hawaiian Hitman did not win in 2024. In fact, he got his win against Lafricas was overturned, right, to a no contest. He lost to Evian Scott in 2024 in April. That was Power Slap, I believe, number 7. Then he turned it around very quickly, faced Dwayne Crespo, Power Slap 8, lost that match by decision. And then Power Slap 11 in January, he gets the knockout against Dennis Vildanov, obviously on the prelims, unaired. And then, of course, at Power Slap 13 in June, he gets the decision victory over the Dumpling. I actually think you probably are looking at the Hawaiian Hitman. I didn't think of this before, but if we're talking about the criteria, the strength of the names, I actually believe for a guy to go from 0 and technically it was 0-2-1 because he had the no contest, it would have been 1-2. But in 2024 to go 0-2 and then in 2025 to go 2-0 and become the super heavyweight champion of the world, I honestly, and no disrespect to Darius, what Darius was able to do is great, but the caliber of athlete that he was able to face, he meaning the Hawaiian Hitman, becoming the champion, I think nothing overshadows that. To go 0-2 in 2024 and then go 2-0 in 2025 and become the champion, I think it's a no-brainer. I would take the Hawaiian Hitman, although it does seem to me like they don't want to give 2 awards to the same person, so maybe that's why, because they gave him an award already.
Yeah, but how much do you think recency bias plays into things? Because we see often at award shows, I mean, even like the Academy Awards, like, shows that come out in the fall, more recent, seem to get, more votes than things that come out earlier in the campaign. And do you feel that some of the performances, in the second half of the year get held at a higher rate than some of the performances in the early half of the year?
Of course, I think naturally that's just a human instinctual thing. It's the thing that what have you done for me lately? And I will say to the point that you made, this is the second year in a row that we made this mistake because it was the same last year. I what I will say to Power Slap's credit is that there's not going to be a lot of, and if I'm not mistaken, if somebody can please feel free to correct me, there was no other real moments besides Nate and Aaron that would have qualified for that award to that degree. And so I understand why they name it and sort of give the criteria a bit differently. But it is the second year in a row that we did that and we made that error. So our apologies. It's not easy to find these things on the internet to figure out what happened last year. But yes, Darius the Destroyer is the comeback striker of the year. I can't say that I disagree, but I just think as I'm talking through it, when you think about the Hawaiian Hitman, the level that he rose to, the turnaround from losing to Dwayne Crespo to beating the Dumpling, that's just such a large paradigm, and it just is so perfect, right? So he beats Dennis Vildanov in January, then beats the Dumpling in June. Obviously, we haven't seen him since, and we wanted to see him. That would have been, I think, the cherry on top to make him comeback fighter of the year. But for Darius, his record and his losses were over a period of years, and not all of them were against elite guys. I mean, he fought Ryan Phillips, who at the time was at the top of the division. That was a big, I think, a big turning point for him. I think Wes Mena was a great win, but he couldn't put him away. So those moments I think also matter. Like, to what degree was he able to accomplish, said feat? I think there was so much resting on Darius and his rise to the top and coming over to this organization, beating Big Bird, James Stonier, and then obviously Wes Mena is the highest profile one. Mm-hmm. It just, to me, resume versus resume, I would actually favor the Hawaiian Hitman, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, congrats to Darius, obviously winning comeback athlete of the year, a guy that has ascended through the ranks in the heavyweight division, as we talked about, that is incredibly deep, and a guy that puts himself potentially in a position in the storyline to be able to take on Damien DeBell the next time we see him up there on stage in Power Slap. Moving on, rivalry of the year. I think this one was a no-brainer, but before we get into the winners of that, what are some of the other matchups that could contend in here? And, looking at it as you were speaking, I think the biggest one that steps out to me is Darren Godfrey versus the Chief. I think that could be up there for rivalry, of the year. Some of the other candidates, I mean, can you pull an Austin Turpin versus everybody versus the world in some regards? I'm trying to think what else makes sense. I mean, Dumpling versus the Crazy Wine was in the back half of 24. I know it concluded in 2025. So, I mean, you possibly could put that in there. Obviously, Dumpling being, victorious, I believe, January 30th of 2025. So maybe there's a potential candidate there. Nate Bernard, Aaron Turner, would you put in that? I mean, it was supposed to happen, got
No, I think
canceled.
it's rivalry of the year by default. Brendan versus Isaiah. Like it's just there's not a ton. I honestly wouldn't have done that category. There's not a ton to play with there. Oh, Cole, that's a good one. I'm not gonna say that out loud, that's
Danny
a good one.
Henry versus Slapdog?
No. Cole said. Actually, him and Henry said it in the chat. If you want to say that out loud, you can, but I won't. But
Mhm.
I don't want to get my ass handed to me. But ultimately, I do think that it's a bear category. I appreciate that they did it to try to spotlight what was the kind of the first massive rivalry, first trilogy. But two of the matches only took place in 2025. One of them was in 24. So it was by default. But I honestly I don't think there was a ton of a rivalry per se. I think the most emphatic part of the rivalry was in the third match. I think besides that they were pretty friendly and um, you know Cole Young versus Blackburn. I don't disagree with that. The only issue that you're going to run to is it wasn't in the same year. So how can it be a rivalry if there was not a beginning, middle, and end? Um, it was just kind of picking up where something a few years ago left off. So it's tough. Jackie versus Sheena West that came to mind actually, but again, it started a year ago in 2024 and then it ended at the beginning of this year. So I just don't know if that fits the criteria. I'm not sure. I can't tell you, but I agree with all of those.
Mhm. I like it, man. I mean, shout out to Ryan, the King Phillips. We appreciate you joining in and saying that. I think 2026, early rivalry of the year. Him versus Johnny Magna, the King of Kings. Can we get you out of retirement? We know Johnny Magna has fired the first shot. Could we get you back up on stage to fuel this rivalry even more? You're not a slouch when it comes to trash talking. Let's see. Can we get you from the couch to the main stage in a matchup and a potential early contender for rivalry of the year in 2026? I don't know. Let's find out. Let us know, King of Kings, in the comments. Anyways, Ding, I know I'm on a whole other level, so you don't have to comment on it, but it's all good.
You just listen. You were just going. It was kind of like a hose that somebody turned on by accident. Not exactly the hose we wanted to be on, but the hose nonetheless. I think Johnny Magna is Johnny Magna. He's got smoke with everybody. Obviously, the seed with Ryan I think is planted, but I think those guys like each other. The I don't want to say the issue. I don't have any problem with Johnny Magna at all, of course, but I think the trouble that I have with as a if I put my fan hat on with Johnny Magna, the way that he approaches this is shut the fuck up, Johnny. The way that Johnny Magna approaches this is that it's obvious that they're still friends, right? With the guys that he's calling out and saying stuff about. And I think as a fan, it kind of just takes away when you have all the salt, sugar, and spice, and it's not real. Like you could tell that it's kind of like we were just being a little playful, but there's a line that we're gonna toe or whatever. I don't know that it does the same as like Austin Turpin just wants violence, uh, pure through and through. Will say anything about anyone to any degree. You'll love it or you'll hate it. But generally speaking, the person that he's going up against on stage, and this is very true for I think every person he's competed against, the person that he's going up against on stage, he's in their head. And I think that is the case almost every time. We've seen him do it to Wolverine. We've seen him do it to AJ Hinch. We've seen him do it to Vern Cathy. I don't know if I'd say he did it to Alan Klingbeil. Alan's just really a like fun, lovey kind of guy. I mean, he's very playful. But he does get pissed off. He doesn't necessarily show it the way that the average person would. He's got a lot more discipline than that. But that's I think the level to which you can get me interested in somebody competing is when you piss somebody off because the things that you say you've blurred the lines, and this is something that professional wrestlers are innately good at. You've blurred the lines between seriousness and messing around. And when the athlete that you're standing across can't tell the difference, I think that's when you've achieved you've found that button, you've built that real estate, and I think those are the moments I want to see. So to your point, Wes Mena, Johnny Magna versus Aaron Turner, I'm less interested because I hear Johnny Magna chirping. They were on a watch party together. I believe it was for Power Slap 17. It was either 16 or 17. I don't remember exactly. But they were on our watch party together and they were going back and forth. But it was very playful. They were friendly and they were nice. I just don't. I can tell that they're friends. I think Johnny has said publicly that they have a friendly relationship. So I'm not the biggest fan, right? Like Pono Paul Westmena, that gets me up out of bed. As I mentioned, that particular instance, is not gonna work for me anymore because I think the time has gone on. But at the time, that was something that was intriguing. Who is the better man? These guys hate each other. There's real problems here. They work. They have a job, quote unquote, that they get to slap their colleague and the person that they don't like. So why don't we take it to the stage? Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and I lost interest. So that's my piece on the Johnny Magna thing. Although I appreciate that he is kind of that guy. He's the trash talker. I think when he puts the asterisk at the end and he's like, yeah, but actually I like this guy. Just be a heel, bro. That's it. Just be a heel, straight up. Forget the nice stuff. Forget the I'm friendly. Forget the line. You can do all that shit and say sorry later once you fight them and compete. But in the moment, man, you got to be the bad guy through and through. So that's my only message, Johnny Magna. If you watch or if you hear this, I love you, man. I love your personality. I always have. But I need to see you be an asshole to the core, not just on the surface. But let's move on. Seems like people want to talk about Rookie of the Year.
You want to change it up and go Rookie of the Year then?
What are we at next, anyways? Are we getting there? I feel like the rest are kind of quote unquote controversial is not the right word, but I mean, you could upset of the year. Okay, so this is one that I don't think.
Fans want it. Come on, fans want it. Let's go Rookie of the Year.
Okay, so Rookie of the Year. Go ahead. You go first. So obviously the winner was Ellie Dempster. We said male and female. We said Stunt was the male, Ellie was the female, and I said that Abby Montez was another person that you could kind of argue, right? Obviously, tomato. Who she beat? Obviously, she beat a debutante, but then she beat Jackie Cataline, who's incredibly seasoned. On the flip side, Ellie Dempster did it kind of the opposite way. She beat a more experienced Mikey Michelle Brown, and then she beat a less experienced Holly Hood Haley J. But she did get a finish against a person who had been up there before. Again, it's tomato. It depends on how you weigh them. Would you? So obviously, neither of those. Ellie won just in total. I think they should have done male female. But if you're comparing, if you just did rookie, no male female, do you agree that Ellie's the one?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I mean, I think the magnitude of what Ellie was able to do in her first match, short notice, come in, then be able to, rack up 2 victories. I think the star power that she has, I think the impact on the sport that she has in the future, trajectory that she is on, I think it makes absolute sense that she wins Rookie of the Year. Yes, you can say that the women's division isn't as deep, but from the star power, the technique, she really hasn't been rocked at all in Power Slap yet. And I think just from that showcase, the skill, the potential, and everything that she was able to accomplish and be able to amass in the year 2025 puts her in line and deserving of Rookie of the Year.
What a promo, man. I'm going to have to disagree, though. I think Stunt Marshall etched it out. It's close. But I think, obviously, his win against Dante Smiley, I think, is probably, of the same impact or magnitude that Ellie's win against Haley is, right? Haley had the one match against somebody who hasn't had, tremendous success in Power Slap. Dante hadn't competed, but they had competed together on the wrestling circuit. He was a debutante. Okay, fair. But the fact that he sleeps him first shot, doesn't take a hit, right? The pose, he's stuck, whatever it is. And Dante was, I gotta be honest, Dante was talking a big game. He was respectful, but he was talking a big game. The whole 500 Magnum and all that stuff. When I hit you with it, you're not gonna whatever. Stunt's like, yeah, you know what? I don't even need to take a shot. We'll just continue. Then he gets what I would consider to be a massive step up in competition against the inaugural light heavyweight champion, a guy who's competed with the best of them: Austin Turpin, Wolverine, Azael Rodriguez. I'm sure I'm forgetting some people. And you're gonna tell me that he one shots this guy, who's been around, who's got stripes, who's been in the sport. Sure, you could say he's been kind of on a downhill trajectory. The move and weight was a bad move, whatever it is. He still was the guy at some point in time, and he was known for his incredible chin. For this guy to get 2 one-shot knockouts in his first year, and in the span of, honestly, we could have seen Stunt Marshall a third time. For those of you who do not know, Stunt Marshall was slated to take on, Corey, help me out here. He was slated to take on...
In New Orleans, right?
Yeah, but who was it? Brandon Rhodes. He was supposed to be the guy that Manny Muniz ended up stepping in to be. 3 weeks after his knockout over Dante. Obviously, a very easy night at the office. He was supposed to be in New Orleans on July 18th against Brandon Rhodes, which would have been a huge step up in competition for him. He cannot do that because he's part of Savannah Bananas as a party crasher. Obviously, that's an arduous schedule, and that's their peak season during their run. Fast forward, he does take the call for 15, takes on AJ Static Hints. The question is, can he take a shot? He, again, the one-hit wonder, smacks him, sends him down, end of the night. I don't know that there can be another a thing to rival that. Like even if you look at Abby, right? She takes out a debutante and then she knocks Jackie down, but she can't finish her. It's we're talking neck and neck. But if I had to be perfectly honest, if I'm talking millimeters, I'm giving Stunt the edge by just a little bit, and I think Ellie and Abby are also right there neck and neck. But that's why I wanted to be inclusive and fair. I do male and female, but of course, whatever they got going on over there, Power Slap, it's just Rookie of the Year, and the winner is Ellie Dempster, whether I like it or whether I don't.
Yeah, I probably won't comment. I'll probably piss two people off, but I don't know, Dante Smiley, dude. The guy was smiling through, didn't even clinch on this, the slap. I don't want to go as far as calling him a can, but obviously we probably won't see him back in Power Slap. And then AJ Styles hasn't won a match in Power Slap since 2023, gone 4 matches now without being victorious. Obviously, he is, a ghost of what he was in the past. I just think, when you look at the athletes that they put in front of Ellie Dempster, I think, the overall, if you want to say strength and competitor, is much greater than one Stunt Marshall, even though I think Stunt Marshall does have a phenomenal opportunity, but he hasn't been hit yet. We haven't seen, and I guess you can't knock him for who they put in front of him. He has taken care of business, but I just think overall, the level of competition, the amount of wins that the athletes have had in front of, Ellie has been much greater than one of Stunt Marshall in most recent time, at least in the last 2024, 2025. And so I think they got it right. And you know what? I don't know. I think I'm going to be a truther of Ellie Dempster in 2026. I'm going to plant my flag right now, Ding, on this show. I think Ellie Dempster has a phenomenal future and potentially could become one of these booming superstars if she's not already, and could potentially become the entire face and the next evolution of Paige VanZant in Power Slap as it kind of moves and unfolds. Obviously, with Paige VanZant and her future in Power Slap still up in the air, I think Ellie Dempster can surpass and become that next individual that we all know and love and support, and potentially the first ever women's belt holder.
Henry, I got to call an audible, my brother. You're not very often wrong, but you are wrong here. Vince Tracy is not a rookie in 2025, sir. He was on road to the title, which took place in 2024. So unfortunately, I have to say unequivocally, without any bias, you are incorrect, sir. But I do appreciate Ellie and Stunt. Like I said, I think it's interchangeable. Most people are going to argue those two, but the girls she beat have 2 wins combined. I didn't say that. He did. I just spoke it. All right, moving on. Upset of the year. Corey, should I do it, man? I don't know if I should do it. Should I point out something that McKinney Mano showed me or no?
It's up to you, man. Are you breaking the fourth wall?
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna break the fourth wall because it's just what I do. But for whoever does graphics at Power Slap, that is the Crazy Hawaiian. That is the Hawaiian Hitman. Crazy Hawaiian, Hawaiian Hitman. Crazy Hawaiian, Hawaiian Hitman. Although they look slightly similar, they are not the same person. So this graphic here, it says, if I could get these annoying reposts out of the way, it says Upset of the Year, the Hawaiian Hitman, and there's 3 pictures of the Hawaiian Hitman, one of which is him slapping the dumpling, and then there's a picture of his brother, the Crazy Hawaiian. Please, I didn't catch that. That was all. Actually, I shouldn't have even probably said his name, but yeah. So just so you guys are aware, we got to identify them differently. I think the weight difference now probably will make it a little bit easier. And to be honest with you, although there's a massive beard difference, in that photo, I think his beard is tied up, so you can't really tell. So I don't necessarily fault the person if they don't have that name recognition, but I just wanted to poke a little fun and did tell you that Upset of the Year is, in fact, the Hawaiian Hitman and not the Crazy Hawaiian, who hasn't competed since January. But nevertheless, Upset of the Year, I will, there's a comment on here. I won't say from who, but it says, I'll be honest, congratulations, but there were far more athletes that should have been considered. First thought that comes to mind is Greenhall versus Rivero. Another one that was said Was this makes sense? This fight was upset of the year because everyone was upset that the dumpling lost to the Hawaiian Hitman. so so yeah, I think I agree with the people as much as I think the odds, as Henry so eloquently pointed out, I think the odds did reflect. They thought that most people had it at the Hawaiian Hitman at plus 220. That is quite high for odds. To the same horn, or so to speak. I think uh, who was it? Who was the other one? Obviously Blackburn Cole. Those odds weren't far apart though, which was brought up. No, I'm lying. Logan and Russell. Those odds were not far apart. That was my pick for upset of the year. Cole and Blackburn. Those odds were far apart, and so that was kind of the one that I think most people touted.
What was
I'm
Klingbeil
sticking.
and Simons? What was the odds on that? Do you remember?
It was definitely upside down. Henry said it. We've had these engagements back and forth. I don't remember what the number was, but it was quite upside down. So there's there's a few in there. Obviously, Luke having the win over Allen. It was unlikely that Allen was going to be able to do it. Um, he wasn't in Power Stop in 2024, but I don't know how the rules
What
were.
about
I missed that question.
Montoya? Riley's last victory. I mean, I think that was quite an upset.
No, I don't think he was a big dog because DeFrank hadn't really had that breakout moment yet. I don't know that the odds were so far apart, but Henry says that Allen was plus 170 against Luke, so it's up there. Henry, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Hawaiian Hitman was the largest span of odds, or was it Cole Blackburn that the odds were so heavily against the dog and then they win? I think the bookies were just so wrong on that one. Their first fight was a split decision. Okay, that's fair. So we're talking Allen's KO over Luke Simons, kind of coming back, being able to avenge that loss from road to the title. Obviously a really weird match for him. Riley was plus 150, yeah, so he wasn't very high. Um, then obviously you take Cole Blackburn. That's years in the making. Just the way that he did it, though, we've never seen that from Blackburn. He's been rocked before, but he's not a guy that we see get sat down. For Cole to do that three times, kudos to Anthony. Obviously, he stays in there. That's another feat that we don't really see very often. And then for Cole to get knocked down and still be able to figure that out, basically the same odds for Cole and Dane Henry. So see, this is where Power Slap's issue is. So Lane is the crazy Hawaiian. Dane is the Hawaiian hitman. So Cole and Dane were similar odds, basically the same. So I mean they were both championship fights. I think Cole's was more emphatic. So if I had to pick between those two specifically, I would go Cole. Obviously coming back from a knockdown, knocking down his opponent three times. The Hawaiian Hitman, everybody had it differently. There were plenty of people who thought that Dumpling got robbed, including the Dumpling himself. But I'm still, even though the odds didn't reflect it, I don't think most people on paper who know anything about the fights thought Logan Greenhall was going to do that to Russell Rivero. Do they think he wouldn't win? I won't say that, but I don't think anybody had it on their bingo card. The odds for a round one knockout on that match, although I don't think anybody held that prop for a match that's not, a main card fight. I'm convinced that people were not ready to see Logan Greenhall do that because really nobody does that or has done that to Russell Rivero. Obviously, AJ Hinch had his number once or twice, um, but for a guy to come down from heavyweight and do that to a guy who's been around, who's got stripes, to me that was the moment I was like, holy shit! Good morning, Logan Greenhall. Welcome to 205 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lack of preparation on Russell Rivera finally caught up to him. Is a guy that works a lot, never took the sport incredibly seriously, doesn't really train the offseason. And I think he finally met his match with Logan Greenhall, just a guy who came in more prepared and was ready to go on that particular night. And we didn't see the Russell Rivera that we were used to seeing. I mean, Russell was crouched down, chin over the table, which is a recipe for a disaster when it comes to it. And Logan Greenhall just delivered a nice, clean sweep across directly on the chin, and it was night over. As I'm talking about that knockout of the year, we see Austin Turpin versus Vernon Cathy. Obviously, the aftermath of that, Vernon Cathy falling on the table, very polarizing. You see it. But this is one of those awards that can have a ton of other deserving candidates. Do you agree that they got it right with the Austin Turpin, Vernon Cathy, and being a knockout of the year?
So Yodu, So Yodu, when he watches this, assuming he's not watching live, will tell you that I am an Austin Turpin super fan. That I am the Austin Turpin fan club CEO and president.
Hey,
Go ahead.
if Turpin shaved his head, he could be your twin brother, buddy.
Here we go. Here we go. Uh, if Justin Trudeau shaved his head, he could be your twin brother. How do you like that?
Hey, that's an insult, though, dude. Come on. You might as well just call me gay, buddy, on fucking camera. Dude. Come on, man.
So I did pick this as the KO of the year. I will say the criteria by which I judged it and made that decision was based on the spice, the pizzazz, the aesthetic. Like to sleep a guy like that who just literally slumps forward on the table, something we've never seen, and he's so perfectly held up by the table that the catcher Jay Supernova has to tap his shoulder ever so slightly to get his body to get off of the podium, and he falls backwards almost as if he's falling out of heaven and somebody's catching him on the way down. I mean, it was one of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen. He put his lights out completely. It was not a TKO. Vern Cathy was asleep. He was stiff. It was just forget who did it. It was the moment, man. I was there. It was insane. I've never seen such a thing. Nobody's ever seen such a thing. Some KOs that come to my mind that rival that, Logan over Russell was a massive KO. I don't know if you consider McKinney over Dwayne Crespo a KO because it was technically Dwayne was still coherent and moving, but that was a massive shot, right? The no look, obviously something that went viral a few different times across many different platforms. Again, I'm spitting off the top of my head here.
Johnny
The
Magna.
gravity. Johnny
Magna.
Magna versus Ricky South was disgusting. I mean,
And
he
Stump
felt like
Marshall.
he Stunt Marshall over Dante Smiley was, I think, a big one that people talked about.
What about Vince Tracy versus Tyler Gross? I know it was on the tape card, but that was a beautiful knockout.
You know what? I would venture to say, that tape matches are not being considered on here. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, it just seems that way to me. No tape matches have been highlighted in this way, and in some ways, I think I understand why. But yeah, I think there are a lot of tape matches that are great. Johnny Magna over Ricky South. Who am I thinking of on the same card? Jordan Oasis over Jackson Slade, right? We talked about Stunt and Dante. I mean, is it proper knockout? Is it TKO? Does that count? Andrew
Antipov
Fields,
and
Vince
Zhao.
Tracy over Andrew. Say that again.
Antipov and Zhao.
There you go. I don't know who Antipov is, but Ementayev. Ementayev is out. That was a nasty knockout. That one was actually probably hard to look at, to be honest with you. Let's see what else. We talked about Stunt. Um, I mean, I don't know if you can consider um, Darren over Chief because of the no contest, but that was a pretty gnarly one on the second time. Um, let's see,
What,
Hitman versus Dennis.
what's been the best? What's been the best female knockout in Power Slap history?
The best female knockout, I mean, there's not a ton. There's Sheena over Jackie over Sheena, which obviously was a DQ, but a knockout. There's Ellie over Haley. Um, there is, I think that's it. Abby over Jackie Thomas. Abby over Jackie Thomas is probably the one.
Okay.
What would you say?
Yeah, I think so, man. I mean, it's one that obviously there's not a lot of candidates. If you count in a real competition, obviously had Sheena, in the early part of Road to the Title season 1 with, the Sonic the Hedgehog girl who did the, rolling forward somersault afterwards, but wasn't in actual competition itself. So I think, that Jackie Thomas one versus Abby Montez, obviously sitting there in the tape fight was absolutely phenomenal. The only match I think that actually impacted another match in Power Slap, and that was KO getting into KO Chris's head later on and ultimately leading to his defeat. I think that was one of the straws that broke his back as well. And so I think, unfortunately, just, how things kind of, led there. And, I think it's still under talked to, but I mean, Jackie Thomas is a unit of a human being. Big girl, ton of potential, obviously, you have MMA background. someone that hopefully we get a chance to see in the future. But it just has me thinking. I was thinking about this earlier on the drive in today. With the amount of cards that we have, the depth in the roster, it's seemingly now more than ever. If you accumulate one loss in Power Slap, I don't want to say that your career is over, but the window for opportunity becomes less and less now. I think with the roster that they've had and the recruiting style that they have and the amount of new athletes that they're bringing in, I think you get a loss on your resume, especially early on in your career. I think can be very detrimental to you getting a second opportunity up there.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think. Yeah, Cole. We actually we highlighted that. No two siblings have won on the same card. So there's a bit of a sibling curse being drummed up here. But a couple other honorable mentions that it's hard to remember because they were so long ago. But obviously Wolverine over Vern Cathy. I don't think anybody saw that coming. That was a massive finish for him. A coming out party, if you will. Obviously a
25?
storybook. Say
It
that again.
was. It was in 25, right,
Yeah,
Jay?
that was in Power Stop 11. So the the storybook ending, retiring from the sport, and then obviously we find out later that that's not the case. But he comes back, and up until this point he's been near perfect since then. Anthony DeFrank, where obviously as much as I hate to make somebody relive this, the Riley Montoya knockout was absolutely brutal. DeFrank had all the confidence and the aura going into the match. You know, he takes the first shot with a small flinch, and then the second shot he just cannot take. I mean, stiff as a board. The catchers barely could catch him. It was just picture perfect. Um,
Do you think we see in 2026 where a striker that gets KO'd is unable to get off the stage on their own 2 feet? Because we haven't seen it yet. Do you think we see it in Power Slap?
no, I don't think so. In UFC, you've seen people get kneed in the face, jump kneed, spinning wheel kicked, and all these other extremities that generate larger or higher volumes of force. And they've been, nobody's been stuck in the middle of the octagon forever. So I do believe all athletes will be able to get out on their own 2 feet. At least for the next 10 years, unless Damien DeBell's still competing in 10 years. I think he'll probably be doing a bunch of things with assistance.
Yeah, no, because I just, if you look at like, Anthony Joshua versus, um,
Jake Paul
Jake
or
Paul,
Francis Ngannou? Okay.
and you look at the discrepancy there in talent. I mean, that match should have never taken place in the first. I mean, Joshua just toying with him. I think he probably shouldn't have done, or he was probably told not to do what he actually did to Jake Paul in that particular match, in all honesty. But it's like when there's such a discrepancy in skill and background and training and everything else, it sets yourself up for the outcome that happened. And I mean, if something like this was to happen in Power Slap, I mean, you could see something, inevitably go bad and wrong. And if it did happen, what does that mean for the longevity of the sport, the future, what comes next after that? And I think obviously with skill matchmaking, that something like that doesn't particularly happen. But you really don't know with some of these tape matches coming in and the athletic background of two individuals, could we get such a discrepancy in terms of makeup and skill set and athleticism that we are in a position similar to what we've seen with Joshua and Paul? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a an interesting paradigm to ponder for sure. Don, what's up, brother? Jose, I mentioned this earlier in the show, but unfortunately, in my head, Vince Tracy's not considered a rookie. His rookie year would have been 2024 because he was on road to the title. But that's, I guess, up to you to determine.
Dang.
You know,
I gotta make up a new award. Make up a new award. Who is the Canadian of the year in 2025?
oh, that's tough. I mean, the only two options would be Ellie and Vince, and I mean, it's
Gregor.
McGregor can't be. He lost twice. What would you give him Canadian? Is that the Canadian way, losing twice? I mean, history
He's
says
the
it is, but
standard, right? Like,
I'm trying to give you a chance. You know.
I don't know. What
So who?
I don't know. Is that where you think you're going?
I mean, the only ones I have are Ellie and Vince. Ellie won rookie. I'd give Vince Canadian.
All right. Vince
Honestly, I
Canadian.
think it's more prestigious to be American of the year, but so maybe he can be the honorary American of the year. But that's up to him, I guess. Yeah, like he's there, easy money. Yeah, the mercenary. Yeah, I think I'd say Vince. Honestly, the comeback knockout of course, and then obviously a really clean knockout after that. Um, yeah, I'd give it to Vince.
Who's the hide and seek champion of the year in Power Slap then?
Oh Lord, KO
I want
Chris.
you to say it. I want you to say
KO Chris. It's KO Chris.
Really? Oh, that'd be
Yeah, who'd you think I was gonna say?
I thought you were going to say, well, Josh Bouvet.
Oh, that's a good one, I
Oh,
guess.
not
Yeah,
you,
yeah, I guess that's a
man.
good one. I guess that's a good one. Do we see Josh Bovera in 2026? I don't want to spend too much time because a lot of people probably even know who he is. But do you think we see him?
No, I think he's MIA, man. And I
You think
think
he's
that
done?
ship has
Okay.
sailed. I think he is on a boat in the middle of the Pacific heading to Japan. Or if you ask Rodolave, Thailand or Bali, one of those places.
Wow, oh, wow. All right, so he's hooked up with Rod Olave, it sounds like. All right, what else do we got here? What other categories? Did we missed Chin of the Year? We skipped Chin of the Year for rookie. I've always said Dorian Perez. I'm not upset that it's McKinney. My only gripe or criticism with McKinney being the one is Dwayne Crespo is not known for knockouts, although he's a very talented and has always will be going down in history as a very talented and a pioneer of slap fighting in the power slap era. Not a super knockout kind of guy. Steven Rousey's brand new, and then the Dumpling again, not a knockout kind of guy. He knocked out Camille and then hasn't had any of that success since. So I just don't know that. That's not to say McKinney doesn't have an out of this world chin. That's to say that I don't think his resume really represents it. And I think if he's able to continue this run next year, then you could say McKinney Manu chin of the year if he can go past Hitman, potentially Kalani, those guys that are known for their knockout power for dropping people. I would prefer long term to kind of give him a bit of a better resume to let him display his chin. Of course, no disrespect, we love McKinney Manu here, but I just don't think his resume supports it. Where on the other hand, Zakir is the boogeyman, dude. Like, there's no way around it. He's the guy that everybody was saying this or that, or it's. Ryan, I agree with that. Vin is the people's choice of the year. I agree with that. He's a mensch. Obviously, incredible performances from him. So hopefully, coming to a live card near you in 2026. But nevertheless, as I was saying, Zakir, he's the boogeyman. He's the guy that everybody had questions about. His strike was controversial. Then he fixes the strike. Can he still do it? He does still do it. And then Dorian Perez just made him look like this was his first time and that he just had nothing for him. And then, of course, earlier in the year, Dorian Perez takes shots from Pono Pao as well, who's another guy that's known for incredible power and knockouts. So I'm on the Dorian train, man. I'm driving it. I'm selling the Kool-Aid. I'm making it. I'm drinking it. It's Dorian Perez all the way for me, man.
Yeah. You just probably just kind of getting top of my mind. What do you do with a guy like Pono Paul right now? I mean, a guy who seemed to be passed over the last couple opportunities. We haven't seen him in, seemingly 2-3 events now. Like, what do you do with his future?
Nate Bernard.
You think so?
Nate Bernard. Yeah, you do Nate Bernard. You let those guys figure out, does Nate belong? Obviously, again, like I said, the Aaron Turner win was massive for Nate. It was a comeback win. It showed a lot, but Aaron was just not ranked high enough. So for Nate, I think, you have to look at he sort of has to defend his position, and he's also talked about not wanting a championship opportunity at this time. Does it make sense for him to fight Dorian? Probably not. I think Dorian's done enough. I don't see why we're toying around with Dorian. He said it on this program. Frank said it didn't make sense. I'm sorry, Damien DeBell said that on this program. Excuse me, that it didn't make sense for the rematch right now because he lost. I disagree respectfully, but I just don't feel like you need to keep on dancing Dorian around until he loses. I believe that you should just let him get that title shot. If it's next to Darius, it is what it is. What am I going to say? But you need to know, does Pono Paul belong in the tippy top of the division, or does Nate Bernard belong there? They don't both belong there, I can tell you that. So you got to figure that out. Again, I've lost the interest in the Wes Mena fight. I think Wes also should get a top guy and figure out where he's at. Maybe you do, if you really want to dance Dorian around, maybe you do Wes Dorian and really figure out this is kind of Wes's last chance to keep himself there, and this is Dorian's chance to really fortify. I don't know why he needs to at this point, but really solidify that he deserves another championship opportunity. I don't know the answer to that question, but I will say I think Pono versus Nate makes a ton of sense. Obviously he has the loss to Dorian, so it's tough to justify the rematch at this point in time because it was just not even a year ago. So we'll see, but I'd say my number one pick, without looking at the rankings right here right now, is Nate Bernard.
Gotcha. Understood. I'm not sure what to do, so I will pass on that. I think Chin of the year, just wrapping it up. I think the heavyweights or super heavyweights are obviously an easy one. I mean, these guys at the top seem to have incredible chins, thick necks, especially if you're, of Pauly or Hawaiian descent. You definitely have a leg up. You seem to be born with that iron chin, to say the least. The next one, I think one more relatively easy. And I think Power Slap actually did himself a bit of a disservice by not putting out the nominees. And maybe they just didn't want to leave themselves open to scrutiny, which us two knuckleheads are doing. But I think it just gives more prestige, more talk around if you put out the nominees of who are in the running for it. Gives you an extra post to put up there on social. It gives something for people to engage with. But I guess otherwise, that's why we wouldn't exist and why we wouldn't have a show. And we probably wouldn't be on here doing what we are doing an hour and 25 minutes in the show. And if you're still here, we appreciate you guys. As always, whether you're watching it live or watching on the playback, we appreciate the love and the support, everything that you guys do, whether you like, comment, reshare, post, hit us up in the DM, share this to a friend or whatever you do.
Or argue. We appreciate the arguments. And Yodu, as much as you seem to hate me, I love you, brother. And I will always read your comments and I'll take them to heart and I'll look in the mirror strongly after I read them.
For sure. But match of the year, Wolverine and one, Alan Klingbeil. We know he was on these airways buying for that. It comes to fruition. Alan loves Alan more than Alan loves anybody else in the world. And I don't know. Did they get it right thing?
I got to ask you, you say that about certain people. Does anybody love anyone else other than themselves? Like more than themselves? Is there like a person on, I mean, unless you have children, of course, that's a little different. And maybe a spouse, I guess it depends. But is there anybody on planet Earth that really loves somebody else more than they love themselves?
I think it's just a psychology, man. It's like, do you held yourselves in a higher regard than you might actually be here on Earth? Like, are you elevated in a sense of,
are you God?
No,
That's
no.
what I'm hearing.
I just see like the ego scale. And it's like you living in the extreme ego-ness is what I'm saying. And we talk about the wrestlers coming in, like, are you a little bit too far for your britches a little bit? That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've heard the rebuttals about this match of the year. I've heard Aaron Turner, Nate Bernard. What I will tell you is my disagreement with that match. I try to, we try, and I try specifically to be very true to the the nominee or to the category, so to speak. In my head, match of the year means two people competed. It was so close. It was back and forth. It was competitive. Nate Bernard and Aaron Turner was a knockdown for Aaron Turner over Nate Bernard in the first round. Nate comes back, wins with no real like spectacular moments in rounds 2 and 3. But he wins those rounds on the judges' scorecard, so that leads it to the 10-8 in the first round for Aaron Turner, and then the 10-9, 10-9 for Nate Bernard in the second and third, which now puts them at, if I'm not mistaken, 18-18. And so they need to go to a sudden death round in the fourth round. At that point, Aaron Turner is knocked down by Nate Bernard, which etches Nate Bernard over that 18 mark. He then makes it 28-27. Actually 28-26 because Aaron Turner got knocked down, so it was a 10-8. And he wins the match. So to me, the first round and the last round were really exciting. Rounds 2 and 3 were very uneventful. That's not match of the year. That's round 1 and round 4 of the year, or that's sudden death of the year, or that's comeback of the year. But it can't be match of the year. Alan Klingbeil and Wolverine was back and forth. There was a sudden death at the very end, and then they go to a sixth round, which was also a game of inches. It was Wolverine has said it on our program. It was don't move your feet. It was don't let him push you back at all. It wasn't who got knocked down, who didn't. It was very simply who was moving. A match that close is something that captivates people and an audience. That's the only reason I disagree with the Nate Bernard and Aaron Turner notion. On the flip side, for Cole and Anthony Blackburn, I hear that argument as well. I think, again, it was very one-sided. Cole drops him 3 times. He drops Cole once. Back and forth we go, over the course of a 5-round fight. That's very interesting and compelling. But it wasn't back and forth the entire time. Wolverine and Alan Klingbeil came down to a 6th round, and it was inches. It was don't move. When you get hit, it's gonna hurt. Don't move your feet. It wasn't make sure you get back up. It wasn't. It was so small. That's how close the match was. To me, that won my match of the year for that exact reason.
Can you entertain me on Sillyville for a second here?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Stay with me for a second. Pono Paul, James Seekman, underrated, potentially KO of the year, but matchup of the year. For the amount of animosity that went in there, and for Pono Paul to take care of business in round one the way that he did. Let's be real. That one was deep. That one was personal. That one was like almost on the same level of what West Minna Pono Paul could have been. I mean, there was animosity, there was smoke, there was a lot of trash talk. This was like reminiscence of the days of old.
Wow, you built a mansion on Sillyville, huh?
I think so, man.
It can't be match of the year. It didn't go anywhere. It was a flinch, and then he knocked him out. I mean, knocked him down both times. Like it was moment of the year. It wasn't even a match, dude. It was one sided, and it led to
Dude, it was like the dummying though. It was like you got to realize like how much James Seekman talks shit going into it. And on this show, we even talked about it. Obviously, it was the rematch from the show when Pono, struck with his left hand, etc. James had all the confidence in the world going into it, and it was like it had that same feeling and that same buildup that the early days of Wolverine versus Darius and kind of like overcoming that triumphant. And I think maybe just in my mind, everything that built up to it was just there, and just seeing Pono Pao come and just lay, two lickings on him and call him the day and off into the sunset was one of those moments. That's all.
Well, this is an opinion show, so I won't beat you up
Yeah.
too badly. But remind me when we're in Houston in January to get some of what you're smoking. Um, Ryan Phillips, I believe my match against Wiener Schnitzel Wiener was better. I agree with that. I can't disagree with that. Allen cheating for 6 rounds is not match of the year. Cole and Anthony for me. Look, Henry, I can only go by what happened, not what I wanted to happen or what I think should have happened. What reality was, Alan Klingbeil was called for one foul, not 5 or 4 or whatever. And the scorecards were close. That's not subjective. That's objective. This is a fact. It went to a sudden death when Allen was only dropped one time, which means that mathematically these rounds were very close in the eyes of the judges. And in fact, Alan Klingbeil actually won majority of them at the end of 5 rounds because he was able to come back from the 10-8. So I'm gonna, him winning a round doesn't have a ton to do with him flinching or not flinching. It has more to do with the way he hit Wolverine. I'm giving him credit where credit's due. Yoda will probably start saying I'm a huge Alan Klingbeil fanboy or whatever after this. It's all good, brother. I'm sticking to my guns. I say Wolverine Alan Klingbeil was match of the year because every round was captivating and you wanted to know what was going to happen. But I do hear the Cole and Anthony argument. Again, my only caveat to that or disagreement stems from the fact that it was very one-sided. Cole dominated that match. Generally speaking, 3 drops to 1 drop. Far different. Anthony had a moment in that match. Outside of that, I think it was very Cole-sided.
Yeah. All right.
And the scorecards reflected that. It wasn't like, oh my God, I can't believe he won. When Wolverine and Allen got done, you were not sure who was going to win. And then they said sudden death. And even at the end of that, people were like, that was close. Like, they didn't really move a muscle. That's match of the year. But we got one category left, and this one has not been announced. So I will break the fourth wall here, Corey, unless you have any comments on what I just said.
No, I was going to change the subject on you, so keep on
Okay,
going.
perfect. So I was getting it. So striker of the year. What I will say to you, striker of the year, if what I'm about to say is true, I disagree respectfully. But everybody on this graphic, with the exception of, again, the crazy Hawaiian who's intended to be the Hawaiian Hitman, but everybody in this graphic won an award, right? Wolverine Match of the Year, Isaiah Rivalry of the Year, Coach Brandon Bordeaux, Coach of the Year, Ellie Dempster, Rookie of the Year, Austin Turpin, Knockout of the Year. Did I miss anyone? Hawaiian Hitman, Ups of the Year, but that was just not Hawaiian Hitman. And then Makini Manu was Chin of the Year. So that would mean Robert Trujillo, Striker of the Year. I don't know that I agree with that, if that is to be the case. But if it is the case, you're welcome. I just told you how you can see premonition. And if you've seen us do this before, Corey, you remember this. They used to do promos for Power Stop that had no match attached to it, but they would announce the event. And all the strikers that they would feature generally, whether the person taking the shot or giving the shot in this compilation video would be, and there was one where Corey did a green screen over it, and everybody who was on that ended up being on the card. So they do a little bit of this like Easter eggy kind of stuff. I never thought to even imagine that this might be the case here, but it appears based on what I just showed you, it is. And if Robert Trujillo is Striker of the Year, unfortunately I have to disagree, only because I think the story, he beats Dakota McGregor. I think the opponent wasn't the right person for him to get a second time. And then he doesn't compete for the second half of the year. Of course, no fault to his own. But again, I imagine when somebody wins these awards, this is like their first and only time winning the award. Like nobody wins awards consecutively. I want that year to be a year where Robert dominates, two, three different people. He only beat one guy this year. The first time was a decision, second time was a knockout. What Makini Manu has done, I think it deserves Striker of the Year. He's come back, and when he was a guy that got passed over for a championship opportunity, he beat a debutant. Then he takes care of Dwayne Crespo in a way that nobody takes care of Dwayne Crespo. Then he takes care of the dumpling, in a pretty one-sided affair, we'll say. Obviously, he's not able to get him out of there, but he beats him in a way that we don't see very often. It wasn't as close as what people thought Hawaiian Hitman and Dumpling was. I just think those three in a year. Now he's like the uncrowned or number one contender. Everybody kind of agrees. I'm gonna say Makini Manu, man. His year this year compared to last year, I think is just so much different. And of the other champs, you could say Wolverine would be striker of the year.
That's
I
right.
hear that argument. Is that where you're going? Yeah, I could hear that argument. I could hear that argument. So I'll let you say it.
Yeah, no, I just think for him, Vernon Cathy, no one's seen it coming the way that it was, emphatic fashion, kind of going to retirement, coming back out, obviously facing, the top of the division. In 2025, he faced Vernon Cathy, he faced Russ Rivera, and then Alan Klingbeil, who we just seen for match of the year. I think, the body of work, what he's done with Vernon Cathy and, I don't say upset, but I think a lot of people were kind of writing Wolverine off at that start of the year and didn't think they would take care of Vern the way that he did. It was definitely a big shock to the community. Then coming in, Alan Klingbeil going in the war that he did with him. The Russell Rivera match was just a bit of a weird match to say the least. But, 3 victories in a year, staying at the top of the division when you're at the peak of the mountain, everybody's gutting for you. I just think the overall body of work that he put together with top ranked competitors puts him in that position. And I got a soft spot for the old guy. I don't think he's gonna be around for too much longer. So would love to see him take that before he goes off in the sunset. And I mean, seemingly we're talking about that the same time last year as we are now.
So are you out on Robert Trujillo as well? You think you were kind of you would say that that's safe? And I listen, I have a personal relationship with Robert. Like he was the first striker I think I ever talked to like a long time ago before really any of these shows that we do or any of this. So trust me, it's not Robert that's the issue. I'm just being fair here. I don't think that he's done what a striker of the year should have done, whether that's his fault or not. And I don't think it is his fault. It's just not. He spent a lot of time this year coaching, and I think you could put him in that category. But for striker of the year, if what I'm saying to be true, and it's been true for everybody else on that graphic, with the exception of the crazy Hawaiian hitman, everybody else on that graphic has won an award, and Robert's the odd man out. We got one category left, so don't be surprised if tomorrow you see Robert Trujillo as named as striker of the year.
Yeah,
I respectfully have to disagree.
I mean, beating Dakota McGregor twice in a row, I don't think it really is the body of work that you're looking for to see that. But I agree.
Amen. All right, what else do we got? All right, so we did the Power Slap Awards. What do you got on the agenda here?
I mean, I think honestly, we'll recap it. We're getting long in the tooth right now. But, state of Power Slap overall, where are we kind of sitting as the turn of the calendar comes in? 2026 is upon us. Where do you feel we're at in the evolution? And, what do you think the folks can look forward to?
You know what? I think again, like I said at the beginning of the show, I think we kind of fumbled the bag here with the big gap. I'm a little disheartened to see that we're waiting until March 6th to get the first event. Again, I understand that it's tough. It's not easy to book venues, but I think we were headed and we were sort of walked in a direction that indicated that we were becoming more nimble and that we were going to be more flexible. New Orleans, I'll break the fourth wall here again because it's in the past. New Orleans came on our radar. Generally, things come on our radar pretty quickly when they're starting to materialize. And of course that's important to us, and we protect that information and we don't leak it or anything like that. We're very delicate about those things. But it came on our radar like beginning of June, 3 or 4 weeks before Power Slap 13. We're finding out that New Orleans is more than likely going to happen. Just 3 weeks after that event. Then I want to say Saudi Arabia came on our radar probably early September, like right around the camp time. You know that was going to be like a sure thing, and it was going to be on Halloween. Obviously, 15 and 16 were already announced and on the horizon in like August, but the turnaround that they're able to pull off in those periods of time where they are starting to plan is just, it's not a significant amount of time. It's like 6 8 weeks. This gap is way more than 6 8 weeks. So I think I'm just kind of surprised that that's the case. I don't think it's an indication of where the sport is at or the success of the promotion. I think it's more of an indication of all the stuff that they've got going on as a company under the umbrella. With Zuffa Boxing is going to be launching on January 23rd. Obviously, that would have been the day before the first pay per view on Paramount, or the first premium live event, I should say, on Paramount. It not being behind that paywall on January 24th. So could Power Slap go during that time? If boxing is going the same day, probably not. It's too many resources to expend. Plus, they usually do press conferences and things like that in the days leading up, weigh-ins for the UFC. It's just a lot to juggle. I don't know if they could put on 3 different live events in a 2-day span. And so I won't say that I'm shocked. I'm just not too happy about it. I think most people aren't. On the flip side, like we said at the outset of the show, and we posted earlier, our 5 matches to see, and I think most people agree with that, which we appreciate. With the exception of the Crazy Hawaiian Wolverine, that's a weird one. That obviously the Crazy coming on here and announcing his ascension to light heavyweight, it threw a wrench into things. I do want to clarify though, because there are some comments about this. This is not what I'm saying needs to be next, or what we're saying needs to be next. This is what we're saying needs to happen in the year. Whether it's next or not, I've heard some, Logan needs to fight Wolverine, Allen needs to fight him again. I got no gripes, or I'm not disagreeing with any of that. All I'm saying is, at some point in the year, if you don't put the Crazy One versus Wolverine, you may never have it. Because Wolverine, I expect, with 2 or 3 fights left on this deal, I expect 2026 could very likely be the last year we see the Wolverine competing on stage.
For sure. I mean, in a lot of ways, this show has been talking a lot of the semantics, the in and outs, the insights, the in-depth details and analysis. And, for the casual fan tuning into this, they probably won't like this show whatsoever. Just 2 knuckleheads riffing about the business of power slap fighting, what should happen, what shouldn't happen. We're not giving you a ton of hot takes and clips and everything else, from this particular show. But I think for the people who enjoy this type of thing, I actually think that right now it's almost a step backwards to be able to move forward. I kind of feel the state of Power Slap is in a bit of a reset. I'm going to tread lightly when I say this, because obviously we've seen some exits. We've seen Erica leave. We've seen Justin come in. We've seen some changeover in regards to staffing at Power Slap. We do know that there's publicly, they're hiring at Power Slap. You want a job? Check, Power Slap, job in Google. They are hiring in their PR department and the social side of things. So there's a bit of a reset. I feel like there is, something brewing here right now. They need to get their, ducks in a row. The deal for streaming still up in the air. The venue deal. I feel like we're kind of taking a moment to breathe, collect, to be able to get, together, to be able to move forward. 12 events seemingly looking like it's not going to happen in 2026. However, it doesn't mean that it can't. If they can restock the cabinet from the manpower side of things, you get Sam Bodie in there, you get, Justin working at matchmaking, you get your ducks in a row with logistics, you pull some resources from Power Slap to help with the bookings. It's foreseeable that we could still see this, and especially going overseas, grouping matches, et cetera, et cetera. I think there is that possibility, but I think in the early part of this year, the slow start is taking place. Not necessarily a bad thing, because I think where the roster is, where the depth of the organization, the amount of storylines that make sense, I think the health of the roster is in the best place that it's been. But I think from a logistical standpoint, we need to take a step back, refocus, re-engage, look at the strategy. We know that they've shifted the recruiting strategy. Now I think they're looking at their go-to-market strategy and how do they do it, whether it's domestically or internationally, as they break forth into new regions, and how they're able to do that on a more consistent basis. And if it wasn't Dana White, if it wasn't the UFC, who's been able to do this with, MMA in a quite frequent basis, the WWE, the amount of, live events they have traveling around the world, at any given time. I think they're gonna figure it out. They've got the resources. And newsflash for you, people still want to talk about it. Power Slap is not going bankrupt. Dana White confirmed it, and I think we're in a good spot. I think it's just going to take a little bit of time to get going. You can say I'm biased if you want, but obviously we're heavily invested in this sport, growing long term, and I feel like we're in a pretty good spot. We're just going to have to be patient and wait.
Lord. Well, long show. Lots of subjects to talk about. We appreciate it, of course, the support, the engagement. I gotta be honest, breaking the fourth wall again, as I so frequently do with my sledgehammer here. Uh, it's not easy during the what we call the dog days, if you will, to curate content and keep people interested in slap fighting when there's not any new moments taking place, right? The stuff that you're seeing on social is all repurposed and it's reposted, and so we try our best to find those moments and talk about them and kind of be that um, platform that people can come to hear things that are new and interesting that they don't see. And so we appreciate the support, because we know it's tough for us to make it. It's definitely going to be tough for you guys to consume it. So everything that you guys do, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. Happy New Year for everybody. It just dawned on me that this is our last show of 2025. We started this show early February 2023. No, 2024, excuse me.
88
So
episodes.
we're coming up on 2 years here shortly on the show. I think this is 88, the 88th episode. Of course, we've had some specials in there and stuff that weren't numbered, so we're probably a little further than that. But nonetheless, we couldn't do this for 88 weeks or so without the support and love that you guys have given us. So thank you so much. And I will tell you before we go, I actually have the flu and a fever, and I'm still here shucking and driving and talking about slap fighting. So if you got an excuse of to why you're not doing something, whether that's going to the gym, going to the grocery store, doing some push-ups, whatever it is, get your ass up and go do it.
Awesome, man. Great words of wisdom for someone of such a young age. Appreciate you all. Happy New Year. Happy holiday. The last time, next time we see you will be 2026, a new year. Same place, same time as always. And your boys from Slap News going to be bringing you unprecedented slap fighting coverage in the world of slap fighting and power slap. We appreciate you all. Be safe and do not drink and drive.